So my new fancy tea hasn't gotten here yet.
Sad. It was supposed to come already.
Yeah, like the new homeopathic whatever from that store in Michigan.
The wellness
Yeah, so
one.
I'm still on throat coat. Me and Natural Remedies or whatever it is. I should just buy stock in the company. I'm drinking so much throat coat.
You really should. It's so much throat coat.
So much throat coat.
I have my fantastic Irish language.
Oh, cup of tea?
Cup and tea. For those of you.
I just have our branded.
Yeah, you're on brand. Those of you turning in, cup and tea is how you say cup of tea in Irish. But this mug is also a cup of tea on top of Taylor Swift. And I think it's genius.
It's pretty much all the intersections of all of our joy.
It is both a cup and tea and a cup on tea.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to January 25th.
Sure.
Yeah, somebody just emailed me and they're like, our first Tuesday of the month meeting that we have, it's next week. I was like, that's a lie. Oh, wait, it's not.
No, wait, it's almost February.
It's almost February.
Good times.
Just like time keeps rolling, so do empathy exercises. So here we go with the first couple. We're going to move expeditiously today because we do have some special guests, but you guys know how long we can rant about all of the things that we're about to talk about. First up in the news is that the University of Michigan reached a $490 million settlement with the accusers of a doctor who was there for a really long time. And it tells you how terrible the planet is that when I first read this, I was like, oh, it must have been Larry Nassar. No, he was Michigan State. He wasn't University of Michigan. So this is a different dude that you may not have heard of because we hadn't. It's the university sports doctor, Robert Anderson. This ends one of the nation's biggest sex abuse scandals. They think it's about 1,000 people, mostly men. Began in the 60s and went for decades. This gentleman abused students at the University of Michigan. And what's even more fun is about 2 days after this was settled, and they're like, okay, we set aside some money because I'm sure more people are going to come forward. This guy went, nope, I'm coming forward on my own, and sued the university again on behalf of himself and other people. I don't remember the gentleman's name. It's not released. A 79-year-old Michigan man who says that he was abused when he was 22 years old. So a couple things in this. We want to remind everybody that there should be no statute of limitations on abuse reporting, even though there legally is. There should not be any. And institutions will always protect themselves.
Amen. Speaking of
institutions that will always protect themselves, let's talk about Pope Benedict. So he's always been kind of around the edges of the sex abuse scandal within the Catholic Church for a host of reasons, and very few people have been able to put to rights like he knew. And then Benedict this week admits that he knew he was at least at a meeting with one abuser priest when he ran the archdiocese in Munich. And I'll be very frank, you can miss me with anybody in the higher echelons of the Catholic Church not knowing this was going on. You can just miss me with that. There's no way. There's lots of evidence, even though names were not named. So I'm glad that in his declining age, Benny is being a little bit more forthright about his involvement. I hope he is increasingly so quicker. We do know, by the way, people, as I've gotten a couple DMs on Instagram about this, that there is a new Netflix documentary about the sexual abuse scandal. You'll be shocked to know that we have a lot to cover in terms of institutional abuse in the next couple of months.
You guys, so much. I just fell down an entire rabbit hole on cheerleading in the United States today and institutional abuse cover-ups. Like, so much.
And we've got the Theranos miniseries coming and all of that. So we will definitely be talking about the documentary, which is called, I believe, Procession. So don't worry, it's not off our radar. Our schedule's a little packed with everything else that's horrible about the universe and Bridgerton. But speaking of things that are not horrible about the universe, we wanted to bring this because I was fascinated by this. Lila Moss is a model who is also a type 1 diabetic. And I want to drew in here because you may or may not know that this is a glucose monitor. And this is something that she desperately needs to have on her person at all times to be able to function effectively. And she kind of came out and talked about the fact that displaying a glucose monitor has never been allowed before. And that she's currently, that looks very like, that's a Fendi. Sure, all these people that I'll never, ever afford to wear. Versace is who I thought this looked like, and it's evidently a collab. So they're talking about it. Evidently, only 0.02% of people featured in fashion advertising has a disability. 0.02%. So we've talked about Snag Tights being a company that shows people in wheelchairs. And we are always on the lookout for other companies that are doing that. So brava to Lila Moss and to Versace for having this. There's some other people in the article that if you have a New York Times subscription or haven't run out of your articles this month, you can read, and we'll link in the show notes. Dr. Erin, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. This one I believe I got from the Daily Skim, which often provides a lot of my empathy exercises, especially when I don't have time to necessarily scroll through the Twitters. But this one came to my attention because as two humans who are not mothers, we understand that we don't know a lot about the experience, but we often empathize and share stories when we have them. So this is a viral story of a 27-year-old mother. Her viral TikTok is the story, excuse me. And she gave birth prematurely to her daughter, Eden, after 27 weeks. And she returned to work 12 days later because she wanted to save her unpaid leave for when she could spend time with Eden after she was released. So it's a very short TikTok talking about really unpaid leave for parents and the problems that this causes in the United States. So it's a nice story in that a lot of lovely people on the TikToks and other places chipped in and sent her money so that she was able to, she said, I no longer have to choose between being with my daughter and paying the bills. And that is a sad testament to the state of paid family leave in the United States and the situations that parents are forced into in order to be able to pay the bills and feed their children. So we're glad that Rebecca was able to get some help from some lovely folks on the internet. But we are sad and will continue to advocate for more comprehensive paid family leave that is empathetic towards the humans that are responsible for tiny humans.
Yeah, we're like one of the only industrialized nations
that doesn't have it.
Mandatory paid family leave.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll be ranting about that in the future. All right. Our last empathy exercise is more I would say a nostalgia throwback.
So exciting. So exciting. Y'all, Jamaica, for the first time in over 20 years, has a 4-man bobsled team that is qualified for the Olympics. In our Olympic coverage last year, when we covered the Tokyo 2020 Olympics that occurred in 2021, pandemic delayed, we did a video on our YouTube that we'll link in the show notes about our love of Cool Runnings, which is the story of the 1988 Jamaican bobsled team that qualified for the Calgary Olympics for the first time ever. And, very famously made a sled out of pieces of wood. And there's a great picture in this article of their original homemade sled that they trained on. So we're super excited that they are returning to the Olympics. The highest they've ever placed is 14th. And we will cheer for these fellas as they go forth.
And we will be singing the Sanka Coffee song as we do so. All right. Well, as we've alluded to, and if you've seen the PR for today, we are joined by our, we are honored to be joined by, and we'll essentially be turning this live over to Sharyl West Loeung in a couple minutes, and some of her students from the vaccine project that we've been checking in with consistently forever. So Sharyl, I'm going to bring you on up here, girl. There you are. Hello.
Hello. You have no idea what a great segue that was, because as I bring on my Gen Zers, the night before, as we were prepping for a COVID memorial, I'm, had to lighten the air for a moment and made just the most beautiful segued Cool Runnings quote.
Yes.
And they looked at me
and they were like,
I was from outer space.
I know. I wanted to say, hey, youths on the call, find Disney Plus and watch Cool Runnings and be thankful.
It was a very painful moment, and
Yeah.
I couldn't let it go, so I tried to explain so that it would be better, and it got worse.
Yeah.
It always does. Whenever I
It
teach
always
about
does.
prisons, I always used to reference Shawshank Redemption,
Mhm.
and then I realized I was getting a lot of blank stares, and now I'm like, anybody? Shawshank Redemption? No. Orange is the New Black? Tell me how you understand prison.
Mhm.
Through pop
Narcos?
culture.
Like, where are we coming from?
Where are we coming
If
from?
you don't bring a clip, you can't do it,
That's true.
So-
Probably true.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's my segue to having worked with some really great Gen Zers despite their poor taste in movies. So we have been working since June on bringing COVID vaccines to McLean County, which is Central Texas. Originally first to college students, and then we were asked to kind of segue into our local community and those who were needing better access, essentially. And so we worked with an HIV food pantry. We worked with some unhoused populations. We worked with a local elementary or middle school once the PD Pfizer came out, do some weekend clinics, and try to do it coming off of what I would say is probably second shift for parents who work some different hours. One update is that we are done with our grant cycle as of December, but the health district actually called me last week and asked if I would keep organizing clinics. And so that's something that we'll continue to do. And those students who want to, we've got probably half of our group of 18 are pre-med. Some of them are looking at being in medical field. Some of them are looking at public health. We have a pretty unique program here that's a burgeoning field of medical humanities. And those students will go into public health.
Oh, okay.
So some will go into medicine specifically, but it's a really great major, honestly, that's a little bit different than your bio. I think I have one on that I'll tell a little bit more about it. So one of the things that we did that was a little different than just giving vaccines is that we, if you caught the last episode, planned a memorial service to give some space for those who really maybe hadn't been able to do a memorial for a loved one, or just needed to grieve the loss of all kinds of things that have happened, whether it was the loss of autonomy, the loss of things that, traditions in their families, the closeness, the isolation, just really needed to say, hey, something's happened here and it's been really hard. And I have a lot of feelings about it and I haven't had a chance to process, and we want to stop and mark. At that point, it was November, which we knew in the world that it had been 2 years of COVID. And we wanted to say, hey, what does this mean to us? And so we had a vigil that took place that was a very embodied, multi-station, multifaceted experience. But we wanted to share a little piece of that with your audience and friends today. So I'd like to introduce the students I brought with me. I couldn't bring them all. They're in class. I don't understand, but they do that.
Yeah.
So class.
Let me bring some of them on if you don't mind.
No. Would you like the three that have joined us? Would you like all three of them with us?
Yes, whoever you have. I don't even know
right.
who's here.
There you go.
So Nate came on your first show. Nate, do you mind giving the spiel who you are?
Yes, I have seen Cool Run-Ins.
Yes.
I'd like to state that first. And second, I'm a senior studying statistics and sociology at Baylor. Yeah, I've been involved with a lot of the work that Cheryl's been doing for probably like the last 3.5 years. And yeah, super thrilled to be here again.
And Manal?
Hi, I'm Manal. I'm a junior neuroscience major, hopefully going into the medical field, like Cheryl had said. And like Nate, I've kind of been involved in some of the projects that Cheryl has done over the past few years, and I'm really excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Diana, and I'm that student that's doing medical humanities. I will be going into emergency medicine, but I also bring this into my passion for Doctors Without Borders. And if you would like a short explanation of it, it's basically the things that medical school leaves out. So a lot of medical schools aren't required to teach ethics, and so people are making ethical decisions with no background. And we learn about the patient's experience with disease, how to help people through grief and the process of death. A lot of things that doctors are forced into, but have no training on. Yeah, but I'm new-ish to Miss Cheryl, but we keep meeting in every facet.
Yes. So all three of these students are also involved in the interfaith work that is happening on campus as well. So they have lots of chances to hear from each other and do good empathy work. So with that said, if you are up for it, we would like to lead you in an exercise, if that's okay.
We would love that.
All right. Manal, I'll let you start us off.
As Cheryl said, my name is Manol, and joining me are my friends and colleagues, Nate, Diana, and Miss Cheryl, and today we're going to lead you in an exercise in remembering. So some of the things may feel 1,000 miles away and 100 years ago, while others may feel as close as your very heartbeat and as immediate as every breath. When it comes to something as big as a global post things at the very same time, that's okay. We find it helpful to recall what we know to be true. We now know that sometime in November of 2019, in what seems like a lifetime ago, SARS-CoV-2 entered our lives, soon to be known as the coronavirus. COVID-19, COVID, or just Rona. What might have begun as a faraway disease off the radar for many people would soon be declared a public health emergency of international concern by the World Health Organization, and it reached the status of a pandemic on March 11, 2020. Many of us learned this news while away on a spring break trip, on a beach, on a plane, or sitting at home, wondering if we would ever be returning to school at all. But unless you were on the West Coast or your family was overseas, chances were your life was still relatively unaffected.
It's hard even now to imagine the rapidness with which our circumstances changed. How could a disease in another country become a disease ravaging the western seaboard, from a cruise ship to the entire state of California on lockdown? Then we turn to the east, and New York City tears our heart out like it hasn't in almost 20 years. We've cried for New York City first responders before, but not like this. Before we know it, the seasons have changed. Easter dinners, Passover meals, and iftar feasts were eaten alone. It's May, and at least 100,000 people in the United States alone have died. We learn a lot about ourselves during that time. We learn about Zoom bombers and how to tell the difference between asynchronous and synchronous classes. We get creative. We remember to reduce, reuse, and recycle. For once, we are grateful for phone calls over text. We long to be together. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the racial reckoning of the summer of 2020 and what we learned from that too, what we're still learning today. 2020 broke us wide open and exposed our deepest fears and our truest humanity. It reminded us what mattered, and we all have had to wrestle with that if we are honest with ourselves.
The past school year was all about more firsts and surviving. We wore masks and COVID tested every single week. We isolated and quarantined. Some of us were at home, some of us took online classes or hybrid, and others were full-time. We had some versions of our college experience, but we couldn't ignore that another wave of COVID could break out in the midst of our college. We all just tried to do our best. The school year has brought its own set of contradictions. We finally have a vaccine and the ability to gather more safely than ever, but we also have a new variant and then another. And we've seen our deadliest days 9 months after the release of a vaccine. So we all just want to get back to normal, but at this point, what does that even mean? We have an opportunity to make our version of normal by accepting the things that have changed and living into new possibilities. We can still have a world where we see nurses and grocery store clerks as heroes for their everyday ways. And we can still carry with us that they are just as important as doctors and lawyers. We can thank our teachers for helping our kids stay safe and helping them learn. We can consider it a privilege to be in a classroom with our peers, and we take time to get to know our community and get involved no matter where our career paths take us. As Mother Teresa says, we belong to each other. 2022 sounds just as much like 2020 as the deja vu that comes with it. Maybe it's just the timing. We remember that liminal space when we all knew something was coming but had no idea what lay ahead of us. Our bodies remember it too. Our January, February minds remember. And so we walk into a room a little tenser and find the tendency to protect our own and make quick judgments of who might be a threat. While some corners dare whisper the word endemic, others speculate we might see 1 million lives lost before our next high holy days. It is easy to focus on the unknown future that feels so familiar, but if we stop in our present, as we look at the ground underneath our feet, we are reminded that we are alive and that we belong to each other.
Today, we want to do some remembering the strength and resilience of those that are no longer with us, but also our own. We've been through more than we allow ourselves to think about, and it's okay to take a moment and remember that too. We want you to be able to share your story and the story of those you have lost. We may cry together, we may laugh together, we may sit in silence together, but today, after a pandemic marked by separation, it is so good just to do any of those things together. You are not alone. You are never truly alone. Take advantage of our togetherness here on this glorious platform we love. Find a friend, text a friend, make a friend, and remember that you are alive and we are thankful for it. For all of us, for the long haulers and the caregivers, for the mourners and grievers and back to normal seekers, for the nothing has changed and everything seems the same. Why does everything seem the same crowd? Find rest. For the too far behind and the too lost to know, for the too weary to care and the so anxious they're scared, notice rest. For the movers and shakers too busy to pause, they will see it a new way forward. They carry us on their backs, but their necks stoop forward, for we are all too heavy. Make rest. For those waiting for news and those still hearing the same phone call again and again. For those whose dreams drift to hospital beds, to words unspoken, to work left undone, to legacy left unfinished. Rest is yours. Breath is yours. Breathe. Breathe in all the precious air your lungs will hold and exhale as loudly as you wish, for there is no judgment in living. You are alive. You are alive. You are alive. You are alive. And we are grateful for it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, everybody. I feel like we should just entirely end right now and know where we go from here. Those were some incredibly poignant and powerful reminders. Sharyl attacked me at least 3 times personally in her part. But I think
Shades of Encanto here.
yeah, oh my gosh, I just keep getting attacked. It's really hard. It's always good for us to hear other perspectives. And one of the things I've loved about talking to you guys is that you guys are not the only college kids that we hang out with, but it's a different college experience that you guys are having than the ones that we work with at Charleston Southern, entirely because of how the universities are responding differently. And so it's just a different in the size and a whole lot of other things. But so much of my stress has nothing to do with my college experience, but I feel so many of the same emotions that you're referencing. And I think that's a really important thing for us all to remember. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think like, it's so amazing that your third TEDx talk from TEDx Chicago dropped last week, in which you talk about how we can address others' pain and trauma, and that trauma is not comparable. And, a big part of the conversation you were having in that talk was around understanding what trauma is to other people and validating it and giving space for it. So I thank you guys for continuing that. That's something both Dr. Kristen and I feel very strongly in acknowledging. It can be very easy to dismiss something as not as traumatic or not a big deal. But if we're not living in your body and in your mind, we don't know how big a deal that trauma is. Only you do, whatever that trauma is. So I think that's such a beautiful crossover between your TEDx talk and the work that Sharyl has been doing and these students have been doing throughout this whole project, in just like the beauty of providing space for people to talk and to be together, to just be together, and share their stories and acknowledge each other's pain is something that is very difficult to do in this period of isolation. But even before then, it's difficult to do. So I was just struck by the similarities in that language. And I was like, oh, I love this synergy. Yes. Synergy.
And speaking of synergy, with not even knowing it, Sharyl and I wrote almost the exact same TED Talk and submitted it to different people. So like I submitted it to Rutgers and she submitted it to Bayonne. Like it's without talking about it. It was quite something.
You guys are on like the wavelength. You're on the same wavelength. It's beautiful.
Yeah. What I'd love to know, Nate and Manal, if you'd be willing to share, was any reflections you have on guiding some of your peers through this when you guys did this in November. Anything that surprised you, anything that was difficult. I'd love to hear some reflections if you have time.
Sure.
Well, Nate go. Can I let Nate go first because he's about to have to run? But
yeah, me and Manal are sitting in the same room and we're both looking at each other like, oh man, who should answer that question first? Because it's such a tough question to answer. I think a lot of it is just how much that people really don't want it. Like they're not looking for you to sit there and give advice and to tell what all the answer is, but it's much more just holding the space, echoing what y'all have said, and just to be able to give room for people to share their stories and to be able to share their trauma. Because I think that what we hear, I especially feel like in the last month or two, is that nobody really wants to talk about COVID anymore, and that we all just want to move past it as quickly as possible. But to give somebody the space to share their trauma, whether it's somebody, maybe they've lost their parents or their grandparents, or maybe it's just somebody who's felt like they've been cut off from a lot of their friendships over the past year or two. Just somebody who will give a listen to what they have to say, I think is something that's, at least I have found, is impactful to folks.
Thanks for that, Nate, and thanks for joining us. We know you have to leave, so thank you so much.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Nate.
thanks all so much. This has been awesome.
And just to like kind of add on Nate's point, I think something that I have learned and like had found helpful is having patience through like myself and also for other people when, you know, they feel like they need to tell their story and tell my story, and just give that space and have that grace for other people, and be patient with them, just as, you know, you would want that patience given back to you in hearing the story, but as well as acknowledging the fact that some people do just want to move on and kind of put everything in the past and have a fresh start. But either way, having kind of just the mindset of it's okay, and to like be patient and graceful with whatever choice somebody may choose.
Yeah, I think that's such important lessons in the midst of all of this, because I mean, no matter what people want, we're not going back to normal. It's not physically or metaphysically possible. And moving on from it may be something that people can temporarily do, but it's not something that we as a society can do in any way, shape, or form. So being able to acknowledge in the moment, like, you guys can process however you need to process. And we'll just hold this space and let that be, and let it maybe be the only space in their world that logic doesn't need to interfere with. And you can feel whatever you feel as you grieve in the presence of a sympathetic and listening ear. And I think that especially for like, y'all's college schedule was so disrupted and like so incredibly back and forth, and so many emotions. For y'all to be able to do that, I think was really holy. And I'm glad you got that experience for you to know what holding that felt like. But I'm also really glad that you were able to serve your peers that way.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we emphasize just as an interfaith community is the importance, just like y'all do, of story sharing. And because that they've been doing that for, when all you're a junior now, so for 3 years, that they've been able to kind of step into that space with some practice. These are stories that I don't think anyone expected to be sharing or hearing, but I don't know that any of us ever really get that opportunity to know what it is that we're preparing for, right? And so I think that part of the work of whether it's interfaith leaders or empathy educators, whoever you are, that being able to share stories and hear stories is such a practice, and it's such a continual work. And so in doing that kind of hard work, whether it was 2016, 2018, 2020 to pandemic, I mean, it's just been this kind of continual movement of really complicated things, and it probably will continue to be, but they've kind of growing up is what I see from them around hard conversations. And instead of closing off from them, these particular students have chosen to lean in. And so that has made them much more capable of truly hearing their peers, even when it's frustrating and when it's something they don't understand at first, but they can at least hear. And I think that's where that patience comes from.
Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, one of the things that Manal said as well that struck me was like creating that space and holding that space without judgment for what people are feeling and experiencing. And I mean, that's always hard, but I feel like that's been really hard during COVID, to give people the space to feel what they're feeling without judging them for it, wherever they fall on whatever topic around COVID that you're speaking about. And it's such a practice and it's such hard work. But you're right, Cheryl. I mean, it like leaning into the hard conversations is so much more healing. It's harder, but it's much more healing and productive than leaning away from them. But I think so many people, and what you said too, Kristen, about people wanting to go back to normal, so much of that is a coping mechanism. So much of that is about protecting yourself. And it being as vulnerable as your students were able to be and to push themselves to be is a remarkable skill that they've developed that will serve them 100% past this project, but it's really hard work. So I'm so impressed by what y'all were able to do and to be so intentional about holding that space of grace and non-judgment.
We talk about non-judgment a lot, so I was really impressed when all that came back out. I was like, oh, it's sticking. It's working.
It's not a Cool Runnings reference, but it's very good all the same.
It is. I mean, I will take
Yeah,
non-judgment over Cool Runnings. It's okay.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I kid.
Yeah. And I do think, as Manal wants to be in the medical field, I mean, to be able to go in and have good patient care and do it with non-judgment and patience, that is going to make you an incredible doctor.
Yeah. We know increasingly, even in medical fields and lawyer and, skill-based professions, that the thing that is differentiating people with both employers and clients is the human side of things. And that skills are a lot more teachable than humanity is. And so I'm really glad that that not only that you took advantage of this, Manal, and that you're going to carry this forward with you. I think that's says a lot about your character and a lot about what you're going to do. And that applies to everybody that has been part of FIVA. And we're just every single one of you we've interacted with, we're consistently impressed with. So thanks so much for giving us your time and not just to, doing this is like extracurricular, like this wasn't anywhere on a grant report. So we're particularly grateful that you guys were able to pop in with us here during this time. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Having us over and over.
It's our pleasure. All right, pals. Well, if you are listening to this or watching this, either on the replay crew, hello, replay crew, we love you. Or if you are joining us here, we would deeply request that if you've enjoyed this conversation, you hit that like button. The algorithm is fairly obsessed with it. And so therefore we have to be too. If you've liked these conversations, we have them a lot. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And also, one of the things that we're getting a lot more excited about this year is our newsletter. We know newsletters are kind of cheesy, but we have really fun conversations in them. And we teach you all sorts of things like what Buddhist New Year is called. These are very, very fun, quick emails that we send, and we'd love to have you join us. The link to join and subscribe to the email is below in the show notes, either on your podcast or on your YouTube, and we'd love to have you join us. Everybody, it's been a privilege and a pleasure, as always. We're very, very grateful. Wherever this finds you, we hope that you heed the words of the liturgy and that you find rest. All the best, everybody. Bye.
Yes.